And this one's about Briahna Joy Gray. So I don't know if you guys are aware of what's happening now, but it's not the first time. There is now a push, which seems to have been led by the Daily Beast and probably some other bots out there, those troll farm groups, to fire Briahna Joy Gray from The Hill Rising because of the discussion that her and Robbie have had in reference to Israel and Palestine. I kid you not. But this isn't the first time. Before we get into that, I want to take you back to a time when people were trying to get her kicked off of YouTube. They were trying to take down her Patreon. The NAFO trolls, they come after people. This was in reference to Russia and Ukraine. And when she interviewed this gentleman who basically sent a troll farm of NAFO trolls after her on Twitter, they were smearing her. People were sending her racist tweets. They were trying to take down her Patreon. They wanted her off of YouTube. They wanted her off of the platform. So this isn't the first time. So I want people to pay attention to this. But this was the first time that I remember. It was when she had this interview with this gentleman and he got upset. People got upset because she rolled her eyes. Listen to this.
They're stealing Ukrainian children. 500 just yesterday were shipped to Russia. And this is why we should be supporting them. We cannot allow this kind of evil to go unchecked, just on a basic moral reason. I mean, don't you agree with that?
I'm sorry, I don't. And here's why.
Why?
There are gangs that have overtaken Haiti. There is a cholera pandemic that was started by the UN. UN members raped Haitians. A third of Pakistan was underwater. Should we go, due to the climate crisis, should we go and invade China because Uyghurs are in concentration camps? Tell me, articulate. And this is the question that I asked Matt Duss when this war first started. Until you can articulate to me what the rationale is behind where America intervenes and where it doesn't, and give me some kind of moral accounting that makes me believe that it's actually about moral commitments and realizing how much of our money and our resources in the richest country in the world can go to saving lives and increasing the quality of life for the most people, as opposed to a strategic military intervention for territory, resources, and political control. If you can articulate to me why this is truly the most deserving humanitarian case on the planet, as opposed to a continuation of these Cold War policies, we want our economic system, our oppressive, by the way, economic system to maintain global dominance, then I can start to entertain a conversation about what our intervention should be, how long, and how much. But there is nowhere in the entire public sphere that conversation is actually happening, and nowhere close to a rationalization that's been presented.
So the part where not everyone, the part where the NAFO trolls got upset was this part here, because they said she rolled her eyes about the children.
Stealing Ukrainian children. 500 just yesterday were shipped.
That part. So they took this because this clip was posted on Twitter, right? People take clips from the interviews, they share them on Twitter. So they took that clip of that guy that she interviewed. He took that clip and basically he sent the NAFO trolls like after her, right? And I was just like, this is crazy. And the NAFO trolls are wild. So when that happened, again, like I said, they were on Twitter saying like, we got to get her off. Let's get her kicked off Patreon. Let's get her kicked off of this and kicked off of that. Like this shit is wild. Like people have nothing else better to do, right? So now here we go again. This time it's the Daily Beast. Someone's trying to get me fired from the Hill by leaking to the Daily Beast. I've been incredibly proud of my coverage of Israel and Palestine on the Hill, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to represent a view that is too frequently erased from corporate news. Also, all my quotes in this article are based. So we're going to get to the article in just a second. So apparently it sounds like we'll get to that in a second. So we're going to go to this particular clip here, because Bree says a reminder of what caused all the fuss, defending Palestine's right to resist occupation under international law and calling out the lies told by Biden and others to justify Israel's disproportionate response and genocide against Gazans. Listen to this. This is what kicked it off, apparently.
The condemnable action is the killing of civilians and innocents. The condemnable action is not resistance itself. That is something that is worth a distinction. And if you create conditions, every defender of Israel right now is saying, well, killing Palestinian kids is collateral damage. That's what it means for Israel to defend itself, that it's going to kill some Palestinian kids and innocent.
And I have criticized that every time it has appeared, has come across our screen. But what the
United States of America did was to stand at a podium and say, without any caveats, Israel has a right to do that, to defend itself, even if it means killing those innocent women and children. And what people are responding to is the inconsistency with which the lives lost that are innocents are treated. And yes, it matters infinitely more that a sitting Congress member, and by the way, also Lindsey Graham, it wasn't just Max Miller, it was any number of Republican Congress members. Lindsey Graham also echoed the sentiment that we should level Gaza. He wants to go to nuclear war with Iran. That's the situation we're in. And so you're sitting here criticizing whoever runs the Black Lives Matter Chicago Twitter page. And I'm criticizing members of Congress who are openly
members of Congress too.
Who are openly contemplating genocide against a population of 2.3 million people, half of which are children.
And it's a population of people that they don't, particularly the West, doesn't care about, right? So we got to keep it real, because the same type of compassion that they had for the Ukrainian children, they don't have that same type of compassion for Palestinian children. And also, I remember people, particularly in this country, this is why I can't spend too much time on Facebook. They were making comments on Facebook about the children in Yemen and Syria that were affected by the attacks, making blatant comments like, nobody cares, they're not Christian. Nobody cares, they're not one of us. And we see this type of thing all across the board. And it's very sad. And I've said this before, there's a lack of sympathy and empathy when you darken the color of their skin and you take them away from Christianity. The empathy and the sympathy for people in the West, for the most part, it just doesn't seem to be there.
Criticize that over and over again. I will continue to do so. Lindsey Graham does not represent my views. I don't share any views with Lindsey Graham. His foreign policy is everything I think the Republican Party should pivot away from, and the Democratic Party, frankly, which is more bloodthirsty than the Republicans on this.
You're saying that you criticize this stuff, Robbie, but
I do criticize. I don't hear a lot of criticism from you of the leftist groups endorsing terrorist attacks.
I don't think the leftist group should endorse terrorist attacks.
Well, they are.
Wait a minute. Well, okay, and I don't agree with that. But what I fundamentally do agree with is that they endorse the right to resist. And you keep sitting here saying, what does that mean? I support the occupation. The same way that if Israel has the right to defend itself, Palestinians also have the right to resist under international law. You are not allowed to keep people in an apartheid state and an occupied condition.
You're not allowed to shoot randomly into people's cars because you don't like the political situation.
You're not allowed to bomb humanitarian aid workers and Palestinian children.
I agree, you shouldn't do that.
Okay, so why is it that it only comes out they're not allowed? Israel has the right to resist, and it is violating international law. That's the subject of the conversation always. Palestinians have the right to resist.
And has violated.
Well, talk to Bibi Netanyahu about it, because it's him.
You're acting like I haven't criticized him all 3 days.
Why is it every time there's an effort to get to the root cause here? Who caused Hamas? Bibi Netanyahu. Who's killing these children? Who's keeping this occupation?
Who is endorsing what Hamas is doing? The American left. That's who.
That's insane, Rob.
Well, it's true. It is insane, but it's true.
I wonder if Bree knows that she has a text message came through on this video. I wonder if she noticed that.
I can see their statements. Okay. Everyone knows it and everyone understands.
Yeah, so Robbie got a little crunk on that discussion, right? So apparently it seems like it's that conversation that really kind of tipped the scales, right? So the Daily Beast, they like to smear people. They've smeared Kim Iverson before too. I talked about that last year. They put out this hit piece in reference to Briahna Joy Gray, and they said, Israel-Hamas conflict spills over in newsroom shouting matches. Where is our leadership? One staffer at the Hill fumed. Notice it's always one staffer, but they never tell you who the person is, right? Okay, here we go. While anchors at the self-described centrist cable news channel News Nation blast MSNBC for supposedly pandering to the far left in its coverage of the bloody Gaza conflict, the network's corporate cousin faces its own internal drama over a host strident criticism of Israel following the Hamas terror attacks. And this is where they come after Briahna Joy Gray, co-host of the Hill's online morning show Rising, has drawn fire from staffers at the Beltway political outlet for what some describe as her pro-Hamas and fringe commentary. Let's highlight vocabulary. Fringe. Didn't I tell you guys this is one of the words they always use when they want to try to turn you off from a position? Fringe candidates, fringe commentary, fringe views. You see how they continue with this? It's not just Daily Beast. This is a continual thing. It goes on and says, during recent broadcasts, she has gotten into extremely heated and at times profane arguments with libertarian co-host Robbie Sav over Sav's belief that the American left, namely Black Lives Matter and Democratic Socialists of America, is backing Hamas. Besides getting into literal shouting matches with her co-star, like the former Bernie Sanders press secretary has faced internal criticism for, as one Hill newsroom source put it, seemingly finding ways to justify Hamas actions. So this is Daily Beast trying to stir things up, because when you say that it's one Hill newsroom source, obviously it's someone who works there. They're not giving out the person's name. I guess the person wanted to be anonymous, but then now you're coming to work and you're thinking, I wonder who it was that said that, right? Like they did this to Kim Iverson. When the Daily Beast wrote that smear piece about Kim Iverson over a year ago, they said a similar thing, that a one source at the Hill at Rising said they're not liking Kim and they're not fond of Kim, right? But again, not telling you. And then you see what happened. Eventually Kim left, right? Now, it goes on to say, in broadcast last week, Gray fumed over conflicting reports about whether Hamas terrorists decapitated babies, suggesting it was a propagandist lie to dehumanize Palestinians and justify genocide. She also seemed to downplay the killing of Israeli children, describing it as a part of combat. First of all, the decapitated babies thing was already debunked, so I don't even know why the Daily Beast is mentioning that again. Come on, the Daily Beast. You are like the TMZ of journalism. I swear, I think the Daily Beast is like tabloid journalism. We also have to hold space for 140 Palestinian children who have been killed in the last weekend of conflict, Gray said on Wednesday. And it is awful, even if we don't have the same images of them, and even if they were killed from bombs from the sky instead of in hand-to-hand combat. Another point of contention is how she appeared to equate the terror attacks with the Palestinian resistance to the Israeli oppression of Gaza. Violence is not a violation of international law. Resistance is not a violation of international law, she declared on Thursday, referencing the American Revolution and the Ukraine war as analogous situations. Additionally, her comment about Israel's longstanding tensions with Palestine raised some eyebrows. So few of our conversations get to what it means to have a Jewish state, what it means to have a belief that you cannot be safe, but for having a demographically rigged situation like that. She stated in an episode on Thursday, adding that she understands that the obviously historical conditions that make people feel that way. Now, here we go. See, this is what they did to Kim Iverson. Now they bring in the other staff members. Several Hill reporters expressed concern over Gray's reckless commentary, worrying that her status as co-host of their morning show would make their job talking to lawmakers in Washington harder. So it's all about access. So this isn't necessarily a problem with Briahna Joy Gray. It's a problem with access. And if you lose access to politicians, maybe instead you should ask we should be asking the politicians why they're not willing to talk to people that don't agree with them. Now, these politicians, they can move across aisles to pass bills that they feel need to be passed that are going to benefit corporate interests. They can move across aisles to pass bills that they think should be passed to fund Ukraine, to support the military industrial complex. They have no problem talking with people that they disagree with when it comes to bipartisanship in Congress. But when it comes to talking to people who are journalists, who are reporters, when it comes to talking to even their own constituents who may disagree with them, they can't have that. And I say, if you can't answer those questions that these journalists are giving you, then maybe you shouldn't be a politician. You're supposed to be able to answer the tough questions. So instead of them taking out that frustration on the politicians in DC who are not willing to give them access because of what a co-host is saying on the show, they're taking out the frustrations with Bree because they're saying you're the reason that we may not be able to maintain that access. Ain't that a bitch? I tell you, let me go on. Where is our leadership? They'll continue. Where is our leadership? Clearly, no one from Nexstar is paying attention. Now, Nexstar is the company that owns Rising. One source said, there is no way they would be okay with this. Notably, the uproar comes just a year after the Hill ditched longtime Rising contributor Katie Halper for calling out Israel as an apartheid state over its treatment of Palestinians. In fact, the program has been a source of controversy and friction at the outlet for some time and has seen a fair share of its hosts leave abruptly. Gray's commentary has yet to be noticed by News Nation, which is also owned by Nexstar. Ding, 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 ding. Did you guys know that? Did you guys know that the same company that owns Rising owns News Nation? Let's continue. Let's continue. The channel has taken on a largely pro-Israel stance in its reporting of the conflict, similar to the rest of conservative and mainstream media, leading it to take swings at MSNBC for its victim blaming of Israel, specifically taking aim at Muslim American hosts. That ridiculous commentary set the tone for much of MSNBC's coverage throughout the weekend, where many hosts seemed determined to say, well, what about the Palestinians? News Nation anchor Dan Abrams, for instance, raged last week. The fact that people have to even ask, well, what about the Palestinians? That tells people that you don't care about those people. Gray and a representative for Nexstar did not respond to a request for comment. The turmoil hasn't been limited to Nexstar newsrooms. NBC News had its own dust up last week after an employee in the engineering department used an all-staff Slack channel to promote a Microsoft Teams event for staffers to grieve the lives lost in Hamas attack and discuss the on-ground stories from family and friends. But the post devolved into chaos after a producer from MSNBC's Ali Veshi questioned a lack of Palestinian representation at the event. The engineering staffer then tagged an HR rep and claimed the meeting was not about Palestinian and Jews and Israelis. You see what's interesting? A lot of these outlets that talk about like they want diversity, and a lot of these companies that say that they want diversity, they hire the people that give them the diversity. But the moment when the people want to speak up about what's happening to their people, they don't want to hear that. So here we go with Ali Velshi. We also talked about Mehdi Hassan, same thing, how they just basically kick these guys to the side silently and hoping that no one would notice that these guys' shows have not been running since this conflict started. And that is crazy that they would think that no one would notice. But this is something you got to pay attention to. They'll do this, though. They'll do this. They'll tell you we need diversity. We want, yay, we got diversity. Woohoo, whoopity-doo. But as soon as your issue comes up about your people and you bring it up, they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to deal with that. Diversity in name only. Anyone entering this group needs to denounce terror and what happened on Saturday, the engineering staffing wrote, noting that claims of freedom fighting and rationalizations do not belong here. The producer rejected the insinuation, asking the staffer, "Why are you speaking for me? Your comments are extremely offensive." They accused the engineering staffer of equating the loss of Palestinian civilian life with terrorism and saying that I have no right to grieve as you do. So, as you can see, they are already coming after Bree again. And like I said, I feel like they're planting a seed because they did this last year to Kim Iverson, got quotes from Hill staffers, put it in an article, smeared Kim. And then the next thing you know, there's the interview with Fauci, and they tell Kim, you can't be part of this interview, even though she had the most extensive coverage and research on it. And next thing you know, Kim was gone. How does the world feel? How does the world feel? This is how the world feels. If you're confused about which side to be on, there is a global, multiracial, multi-faith, popular movement for justice and solidarity with Palestine. There isn't one happening right now for prohibit. And this is what I told people. This is what I was telling you. Look at all the pictures. Greece, you can see now. France also, I showed a bunch of the videos. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. That was a quote from Nelson Mandela. And I told you guys before, there is a statue of Nelson Mandela in Palestine. What's up, Jen? Jen said, Sabby, thank you for saying what you did about diversity. I will not be anyone's diversity hire. Whoop, whoop. That's right, Jen. It's true. I'm telling you. Yeah, they want diversity in name only. So it sounds like, people at Rising are, for the most part, backing Bree. I saw she did an interview with Glenn Greenwald. Go check that out. And she did talk about this as well. Robbie has come out in defense for Bree. So I think that's really good. And I also want to say this was really funny to me is we're going to talk about this hypocrisy when it comes to censorship, because what I'm noticing is some of the same people that said, no, let us talk about the jab and the pandemic. That's censorship. Some of the same people that said, no, let us talk about Russia and Ukraine. That's censorship. Oh, but you changed the topic. You changed the topic to Israel and Palestine. And all of a sudden it's shut up or go home. Now all of a sudden it's fire her, get her off the air. And this is something I've said before. Some of the people who were screaming about, no, free speech, censorship, no. Once you change it to a subject that they don't agree with, all of a sudden they're all for cancel culture. Pay attention to that. I want you to hear this from Miko Peled as well. Miko Peled, he was on the show before. He was a general's son. So he has a book about this. He's spoken about this on multiple platforms. I want you to hear what Miko said. They would never allow him to come onto mainstream media to get this message across to people. Listen to this. Miko Peled explains how Israeli generals saw the opportunity for expansionism when the Arab military were weak. Miko Peled comes from a family of high-ranking Israeli generals, a Zionist turned into a Palestinian activist. I did an interview with him. Check that out if you haven't seen it on my channel. Listen to this.
My father was a general. He was a member of the Israeli High Command at that time. In my book, in this book, in The General's Son, I actually have the actual minutes from the meetings of these generals explaining why they wanted the war. It wasn't because there was a threat. It wasn't because Israel was being threatened or Jewish people were being threatened. They wanted the war because they saw an opportunity. And they began a massive assault against Egypt And when that went very well, they decided they would take the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights, which were areas they wanted to take anyway. They were planning to do anyway. This was a...
Did you hear that part? Those areas, they were planning to take those areas anyway.
Massive assault by Israel against its Arab neighbors because they wanted to destroy their military and because they wanted the land. And within 6 days, it was over. And then what they did was they perpetuated this myth, which we even hear today. People talk about that even today as though it's true, that Israel was under an existential threat, that the Arab armies were ready to come and kill and destroy, and on, and none of that was true. In their meetings, in the very meetings of the generals of the Israeli high command, which, like I said, included my father, they were talking about an opportunity to attack because the Arab armies were not prepared for war. They say this. The Arab armies were not prepared for war. That's why we need to attack right now.
What does that tell you guys? What does that tell you?
In fact, my father himself says in one point, the Egyptian army, which was the biggest, would need at least a year and a half or 2 years before it would be ready for war. So this is an opportunity. And the word opportunity comes up many times in their discussions. The word threat never comes up.